Hello all, welcome back to the class. Here we are going to discuss about conditional branching statements. Generally we know a C program follows a sequential order. That is whenever we are executing a C program, so execution happens in a sequential way, that is one after another, right? But when we are saying branching, so this alters the flow of sequence of instructions, and that is why we are going for this branching statements, or we can say control statements. In order to alter the flow of sequence of instructions, control or branching statements are used. Also we can say to jump from one part of the program to another part. So in that case we are going for this branching statements. And here when we say control statement, this control can either be a conditional control or an unconditional control. That is, either the jump can be based on a conditional statement or an unconditional statement. So here we can also state that it is either a conditional jump or unconditional jump. This is generally about branching. Then coming to conditional branching. When we say conditional branching, depending on the condition, so here the control jumps from one part of the program to another part. We can say that if the condition is satisfied, okay, if the condition is satisfied and it returns the result true, then the control jumps from one part of program to another. In the same way, if the condition is not satisfied or the condition becomes false, then at that time also the control jumps from one part of the program to another part. So based on the condition, whether it is satisfied or not, so here the control jumps from one part of the program to another part. And there are two ways of selections here. One is based on true and the second one is based on false. When the result is true, that is when the condition is satisfied and it gives us the result true, then one part of program will get executed. That is, one path will get executed. And if it gives us the result false, then the other part of the program or the other path of the program will get executed. This is the general flow chart which indicates the conditional branching. So here the entry happens and we are checking for condition. If the condition is true, the condition is satisfied, and if it is true, then it will execute this path. If the condition is false, okay, it becomes false, then it executes this path. And coming to the types in conditional branching statements. So here we have 4 conditional branching statements: simple if else, nested if else, and else if ladder. And we'll see all these one by one. Starting with simple if statements. So this simple if statements alters the flow of execution, and whenever we are using this if, okay, this if will always be associated with a condition. So this if statement always uses a conditional statement, and based on the evaluation of condition, here the control will transfer to particular statement. That is, if the condition is evaluated and it returns true, then it will execute some particular statement, okay, and if it is false, again it will move to the other statement in the program. So based on the result of the condition, here the statements will get executed or the path will be chosen. And this is the syntax for simple if. So we have to start with the keyword if, and with this if a condition should be associated. So here is the condition that should be given inside the braces, and if this condition is true, then the if block will get executed. So here is the if block starts and ends, okay, so this is called as the if block, and the statements inside this block will get executed only if this condition is true. That is, if the condition evaluates to true. Otherwise, the other statement, the remaining statement that is outside this block, will get executed. So this is how the if condition should be written. This is what the syntax for if condition. And you can see the flow diagram here. Initially we are checking for the condition. If the condition becomes true, then what happens? The block of statements that is present inside if will get executed. And then if it is false, then again what happens? This true statement will not get executed. That is, this block will not get executed. Instead, the statements just below the if, or the statements outside the block, if block, will get executed here. Right? So this is what the flow diagram for simple if statements. And now we'll see one example. So this is the given example, and inside the main function, okay, here we have a main function void main, and inside this main function we have one if condition. And if you see here, this is the expression. This is also called as an expression or condition. We can say it as either expression or condition. So here we are checking for condition whether 5 is equal to 6, right? So here we are using the relational operator equal to in order to check the equality of these two constant values. And if it is equal, it gives us the result true. If it is not equal, it gives us the result false. Also, we know that whenever we are getting the result true, then it means that it gives us the integer value 1. And if it is false, it produces the integer value 0, right? So if it is true, then what happens? This block will get executed. So this block is nothing but the block for this if condition, okay, if statement. And if it is false, what happens? This block will not get executed. The statements after this block, or we can say the statements outside this block, will get executed. And now checking for the condition 5 is equal to 6, which is not true here, which is false one, right? So if it is false, this printf statement will not get executed. So what happens? Directly your control moves to this return 0. And here we mentioned return 0, so which indicates that the program is successfully completed. So which won't return anything in the output here. This is another example for simple if statement. So starting from the header file, then we have a main function, and inside this main function we are declaring two variables, that is num1 and num2. Along with that, we are assigning values for this num1 and num2. And here is our if statement, simple if statement, where we are going to check whether num1 is less than num2, right? So if this is true, what happens? Then this printf statement will get executed. If this gives us the result false, then this block will not execute. The control moves to the statement that is outside this block. Okay, so now checking the condition 1 is less than 2. So this gives us result true. So if it is true, what happens? The printf statement will get executed now. So num1 is smaller than num2 will be produced as a output. So here we got num1 is smaller than num2 as output. Then the next branching statement is if-else statement, and this if-else statement is actually an extension of simple if statement. So it is similar to if statement where we have added one more else here. Okay, so this is an extension of simple if statement. If the condition evaluates to true, then the true block will get executed. Otherwise, if the condition evaluates to false, then the false block will get executed. Whereas in simple if statement, if it is true, it will execute the true block. Otherwise, it will execute the statements outside the block. But here we have two blocks. One is for true and second one is for false. If it evaluates to true, then the true block will be executed. Otherwise, the false block will be executed. And here the control will be transferred to the statements after the if block. Once the true block or the false block is executed, okay, irrespective of the result, that is irrespective of the result true or false, finally the control will be transferred to the statements that is after the if block, or we can say the statement that is present outside the if block. This is the syntax. So initially we have if, and we are going to check the condition in this if. If it is true, then this true statements will get executed. Else it will move to the else block, that is false statements will get executed. Okay, so either true statement or false statement, whatever is executing, after completing that, the remaining statements that is present outside the if block will get executed. That is what is given here, that control will be transferred to the statements after the if block. Okay, and this is the flow graph. Here we are checking for condition. If it is true, it executes true statements. If it is false, it executes false statements. That is here, this is for true block and this is for else. Okay, this is else block. And whether the true statement is executed or false statement is executed, after this statements, the remaining statements that is present outside the if block will get executed. Let us see one example for this if else statement. So starting with header file, then inside main function we have a declaration where we are declaring the variable num, also assigning the value 19 to this num. After that we are going to check the condition, and what we are checking here is whether this num value is less than constant 10. Okay, so we know that num is 19. If 19 is less than 10, okay, if it is true, it prints the value is less than 10, that is true block. If it is false, it directly moves to this else block. So inside this else block we have the value is greater than 10, right? So now checking the condition, 19 is less than 10, which is false here. So if it is false, it directly moves to the else block. In else block we have the value is greater than 10, so this will be printed as an output. So that is what is given here, right? So this is about the if else statement. Then the next one is the nested if else. So when we can say it is nested if else means when there is an if statement that is present inside another if statement, then we can say it as a nested if else, right? So when an if statement occurs within another if statement, okay, it means that it is a nested if. And here when we are using this nested if means when we have a series of decision to be executed, okay, or we have series of decision to be taken, at that time we can go for this nested if else statements. And this is the syntax. If you look at the syntax here, initially we have a if condition, and if this if condition is true, then it goes into the block, and in this block again we have one more if condition. When this if condition is true, again it moves into the block, and inside this block there is another if condition. If this condition is true, it executes this statement 1. Okay, and if this condition becomes false, then it executes this else statement, right? If this condition itself becomes false, then instead of executing this one, this will directly execute this else statement, that is statement 3 will get executed. And if this condition itself getting false, okay, then it will not execute the entire block. Instead, it will directly move to this last else statement and it prints the statement 4. After executing this one, the remaining statements present after this if block will get executed. Okay, so the condition 1 is verified first, and then we are going to check for condition 2, and if it is true, we are going to check for condition 3. Okay, so this will happen only if this condition is true and this is true and this is true, right? If here itself we are getting false, then instead of executing this block, we'll move to the else block which is corresponding to this if. And if you look at here, we have if conditions, and for each and every if condition we have else statements. So the inner if condition is associated with this inner else. Okay, so if this is getting false, then we have to execute this inner else only, and this inner if is executed or associated with this else statement. Then the last, that is a outer if condition, is associated with the last if else statement. And this is the flow chart. Initially we are checking condition 1, and if it is true, then it will go for the second condition. If this second condition is also true, it will move to the condition 3, and if this condition 3 is also true, then it executes statement 1, otherwise it executes statement 2. When here itself the condition becomes false, it executes the statement 3. Again, if the outer block itself is giving us the result false, then it will execute statement 4. So whatever this statement is, whether the condition is true or whether the condition is false, after executing the statement, finally the statements that is below the if block or the statements outside the if block will get executed. This is the example for nested if, and starting with header file, then main function. Inside main function we have variable num initialized with value 15. Now we are going to check whether the num is less than or equal to 10. So if it is less than or equal to 10, then what happens? Again it will check for the condition whether the value of num is equal to 1. If it is true, it prints the value is num value. Else it will print the value is greater than 1. Okay, this else statement is for this if, and here this else is for this if. Here itself, if the condition becomes false, then no need to get into these if else. Okay, directly this else statement will get executed. That is this block will get executed, right? And now coming to the condition, first condition, here the num value is 15. We are going to check whether the 15 is less than or equal to 10. So which is false here? 15 is not less than or equal to 10. If it is false, directly your control moves to this else. And inside this else, we have the statement the value is greater than 10. So this will be printed as output. So that is what given as output here. The value is greater than 10. Right? And one more real-time example, what I can say for this nested if is, you can go for checking username and password. Okay, when you are signing into your Gmail account, basically you'll be asked for writing your username and password. First you have to enter your username. So once you enter your username, this name will be verified with the database, that is whether you have entered the proper username or not, whether valid username is given or not. If it is true, okay, if it is true and if it is valid, then it will move to the next field, that is password. Then you have to enter the password. Again it will check for a password. After entering the password, it will check whether the password is correct or not, it is a valid one or not. If it is valid, then it will get login into your Gmail account. And if it is false, what happens? It will not get you it will not log in into your Gmail account. So this is an real-time example which we can give for this nested if. Then the last conditional branching statement is else if ladder. Okay, why it is said as else if ladder means the structure of this else if looks like a ladder only. So that is why it is called as else if ladder. And when we are going for this else if ladder means when we have multiple path decisions. Okay, when we need multiple path decisions, at that time we can go for this else if ladder. And here the test conditions are evaluated from top to bottom. Okay, so once if you see the syntax or once if you see the example, you will come to know about this clearly. What is else if ladder? So here we have to execute the test conditions from top to bottom. And when the condition is true, then the statement associated with that true condition will get executed. Okay, so if that gets executed, the remaining conditions are skipped from execution. So the remaining conditions will not be executed once the condition becomes true, right? And if that condition becomes false only, then it will move into the next if condition, right? So here the control goes to other statements outside the if block. Once the condition is true and it is executed, the statements associated with the true condition gets executed, then at last the control will move to the statements that is present outside the if block. If suppose all the condition inside this else if ladder becomes false, then the last else statement will get executed. Okay, if all the conditions are false, then all the last else statements will get executed. So now we'll see the syntax for this else if ladder, so that you will come to know what is happening. So initially we have if condition. If this condition is true, then it will execute statement 1, which is a true block here. If it is false, it moves to else. And here in else, again we have one more condition to check. So if you check this condition and this condition becomes true, then it will execute statement true. If this condition also becomes false, then it moves to this else statement. And in this else, again we have one more condition to be checked. And if this condition becomes true, the statement 3 will get executed. If it is false, the else statement, that is statement 4, will get executed. Means that if all these conditions are false, okay, if all these conditions becomes false, then the last else statement will get executed. That is what given here, right? So when all the if condition becomes false, then the last else statement will get executed. Then after executing this statement, now the control goes to the other statements outside the if block. That is what given here. So after executing the statement, we'll be having other statements, right? After this if condition, we'll be having other statements. So that statements will get executed. This is what the syntax for else if ladder. Now we will see one example program. Before going into the example, so I would like to show you the flow chart for this else if ladder, and this is the flow chart. First we are checking the condition. If first condition is true, then it executes statement 1. If the condition is false, again it will check for the next condition, and if this condition is true, it executes the true statement, that is the next block of true statements. If this is also false, then it will move to the next condition. If condition 3 is true, then it executes statement 3. If this condition becomes false, then it will execute the final else statement, that is statement 4. After executing this all these if else ladder, the statements that is present outside the if block will get executed, or we can say the statements that is present just below the if block will get executed. This is what the flow chart for else if ladder. Now coming to the example of else if ladder. So here is the program which has else if ladder. If you look at this program, you can see we are checking the condition, if condition. If it is false, it moves to else. In else, again we have one more condition. If it is false, it moves to another if, where again a condition is given. If it is false, then it moves to the last if else statement. Okay, so here we are given with a variable, integer variable mark, which is assigned with value 63. Right. So first condition we are going to check here is whether the mark 63 is greater than or equal to 75. So if it is true, it prints first class. Otherwise it moves to its else block, right? So 63 is not greater than or equal to 75. So this will gives you the result false. If this is the case, it moves to this else statement. And in this else statement, we have one more if condition. And in this if condition, we are going to check again whether 63 is greater than or equal to 65. So this is again a false, right? If it is false, it moves to the else statement. And in this else statement, we have one more condition to check. So here we are checking whether 63 is greater than or equal to 55, which is true because 63 is greater than 55, right? So if it is true, what happens? The true block will get executed, and this is the true block. So printf third class. So this statement will get executed. If this gets executed, what will be the output? The output will be third class. So that is what the output we obtained here. And this is all about the conditional branching statements.